If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And Maxwell Powers.
And this is Steven Avery. Episode 17. Occult Manitowoc. So, in the vein of the Halloween season, even though Halloween just passed, we will be examining strange happenings in the history of Manitowoc and connections to several officers and officials in this seemingly never-ending saga and web of lies and coincidences that is just absolutely bizarre, and there is just absolutely no end to it. In the case, it seems like all these people are just constantly involved with the Averys and other illicit dealings. So, as always, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure your device allows the notifications to come through. Like and follow our Facebook page for exclusive updates on there. And then you could also check us out, Twitter, Reddit, and Patreon. And patrons do get priority for case requests. All right, so did you have an interesting Halloween, Maxwell? Did you go trick-or-treating?
No, not trick-or-treating for me.
Oh, man, what have you been doing?
Staying low.
All right. So the coincidences, of course, in this case are pretty extensive. The conflicts of interest have been well documented. I mean, Avery's presumption of innocence has been violated more than in just about any case in history. Ken Kratz keeps digging himself deep into deeper and deeper holes on Twitter. I invited him on the podcast to be interviewed by the one and only Maxwell Powers.
Wait, you actually mentioned my name?
No, I invited him.
Oh.
On Twitter, but he has not responded to the MindShock request.
Damn.
But yeah, so we'll see. But he keeps getting himself into trouble with all his statements that clearly show that an honest investigation was never performed, that Avery did not get anything even closely resembling a fair trial. I mean, the number one thing in this case, obviously, the presumption of innocence was violated so obviously and severely. And then the state's case, of course, does not make any sense, as we've been examining endlessly. We still have more updates on the RAV4, and then we still have plenty more episodes to cover the strange happenings and movement of Teresa Hallback in her last days, and the people associated with her with their ever-changing storylines. We have Legends of the Bonfire. We have just all of this strangeness, these changing testimonies, and we're still going to cover, of course, Brendan Dassey and his coerced confessions, multiple, one of which was never even recorded, or never released. So, Manitowoc County is, of course, a very interesting county. Would you trust living in Manitowoc County, Maxwell?
No.
We're going to go over strange and occult happenings throughout the history of Manitowoc County. So, on October 5th, 1926, Officer Leo Rock of the Manitowoc PD was shot to death after answering the doorbell at the combined police and fire station. The case was never solved. The entire investigative file went missing in the 30s, so there was a whole cloud of suspicion surrounding the investigation, said Two Rivers Police Chief Joe Collins. That was back in the day of Prohibition, and it was suspected that he may have been working on an alcohol case of some sort. Now, does that bode well for the area when even police officers are just being shot to death at the police station?
Yeah, that's kind of messed up.
I mean, that's definitely unusual. How many towns have incidences where police officers are shot to death at their own police station, and then the file goes missing?
Damn, I don't know what happened there.
All right, on June 15th, 1970, Emma Fick, 76, was killed when an unknown assailant repeatedly bashed her head into a tombstone in St. Mary Catholic Cemetery in Manitowoc. Her purse was found at the scene and nothing appeared to have been taken, and she was not sexually assaulted. Once again, how many areas can boast that they've had a senior citizen have their head bashed into a tombstone in the church cemetery?
Wow, that's crazy. That's pretty brutal.
I mean, that's brutal, sadistic, strange, and the crazy thing is we're just getting started. New Year's Day, 1971. Jeffrey Xida, 18, an honor roll student and recent graduate of Reedsville High School, was found beaten to death along a road near Cato in Manitowoc County. The Waukesha Daily Freeman reported on January 8, 1871, that Dennis Faber was arrested at a manufacturing plant in Two Rivers and charged with murder. On September 17th, 2016, however, USA Today published an article about memorials for the deaths of Rock and Sita, stating that, quote, no one has been charged in the homicide, end quote. So we seem to have not only conflicting information, missing records, but just after the fact narrative restructuring. I mean, that sounds like a Ken Kratz specialty, doesn't it? Yeah, this place seems shady. And unfortunately, there is plenty more. So, July 10th, 1972, Mary Glander, 83, was beaten to death in her apartment, after which several things are purportedly stolen and 2 fires set inside. So that's not one, but 2 fires. Randy Rahl, likely a relative of Rick Rahl. So we're going to be going over the whole Ricky Hostetler case involving law enforcement and Manitowoc and how it ties in with the history of the Avery case and the individuals involved. But that definitely needs its own podcast. So Randall Rahl is charged with the murder based on the testimony of Sue Nelson, who was 13 years old, despite 8 alibi witnesses and the state failing to present any of the supposed stolen items. So does this kind of sound like the first Avery frame up in 85, where Avery has all these witnesses as his alibi that he was up in Green Bay? I mean, we're talking store clerks, we're talking not just family members, so and then they framed him anyway. So is this how justice is done in that area of the country, where they just evidence doesn't seem to matter, does it?
Yeah, well, but that's a long history, though. I mean, I wonder what other towns have gone through. I mean, I guess if you dig it up, like I would say most towns would have some kind of history like that. But I could be wrong, though. I don't know. Maybe some towns are like really nice.
All right. Do you remember Redaunt in the Steven Avery case?
I do not.
Really? He was all over he was in the documentary.
Oh wait, Redon's the house down the street.
The neighboring property, yes. So he's the one that reportedly saw a barrel fire. So in the legend of the bonfire that we went over.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, the fire was like 20 feet tall or some shit.
Okay, so Joshua Redaunt. We went over this. If you haven't checked out the previous episodes of the podcast, check them out. We go over the legend of the bonfire and all of those things. Joshua Redaunt was the only one who reportedly saw some kind of bonfire, some kind of fire in a barrel. No one ever saw any fire in a pit. That was all made up later, after police started coercing and all of that jazz that everybody knows about. And we went over many times. So the Redaunt history within Manitowoc County is, let's say, checkered. Now, you're not going to believe this coincidence, Maxwell. This is mind-shocking. Do you have your hat firmly positioned on your head to not fly off? Okay. I mean, this has quite a few layers. Okay. You are aware who Carmen Bootwell is, or no?
Nah, who's that?
Okay. So we will be doing a dedicated episode on Carmen Bootwell. Some people believe that it's her remains and not Teresa Hallback's that were passed off as Hallback's. So this was 24-year-old Carmen Bootwell happened to have an accidental drug overdose on November 3rd. So this is the only drug overdose in Manitowoc in 2005. And
I see. How
oh, oh,
convenient. Is that what you're saying?
well, hold on a second. Her remains happened to be cremated. The people doing the cremation happened to be paid for by Manitowoc law officials at a funeral home connected to Manitowoc law enforcement. Is this getting strange yet or no?
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. I mean, it's not like the police department always sponsors
Oh, that's
cremations.
this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're gonna have to go into all of the strange happenings and how accidental the drug overdose actually was, and a lot of other timing and connected individuals regarding Carmen Bootwell. But that's a topic for another podcast. The only reason I brought her up is because. Oh, and by the way, she's Teresa Hallback's cousin.
Damn.
So the DNA, so the FBI DNA test, which by the way, that the DNA test is not even close to conclusive. That's the one that couldn't exclude Hallback. So it could be Teresa Hallback. It could also be tens of thousands of other people, but it could also be her cousin. So her cousin is Carmen Bootwell. Okay, so a cousin of Carmen Bootwell disappeared on September 24th, 1977, one day after the fall equinox. Her body was later found in a gravel pit owned by who, Maxwell? You want to take a guess?
Um, who is it by owned?
The Redant family.
No shit.
The same, so that's the Redant quarry, which neighbors Avery Salvage Yard. That Redant family happened to own the gravel pit where Deborah Sukawati, a cousin of Carmen Bootwell, was found. A local.
Damn, that's so weird.
It's about to get it's about to get weirder. A local, Ronald Fenkel, was later arrested. He maintains his innocence to this day. Is this not their only
Wait,
experience with frame
repeat that again. He was arrested for what?
A local was arrested for killing her,
Hmm.
and he maintains his innocence. I wonder what kind of evidence they convicted him on.
Huh.
So,
Wait,
I mean,
so what's going on with this dude?
okay, it's. I mean, we're just getting started with all of the coincidences and occult influence and just this just insanity. But okay, I'll go over this real quick. So on October 2nd, 1976, the body of 18-year-old Deborah Sukawati was found in a gravel pit in the area north of Manitowoc near county highways Q and W. Sukawati was to report as a waitress at the Big Boy restaurant on September 24th, but she never showed up for work. So, from a newspaper article, October 10th, 1977, Steve Campion discovered the body. He informed the traffic officer on duty of the discovery of the body. And Campion the Campions actually have constantly been named in the case. So the Campion, they've found stuff. They seem to find evidence in strange places as well. Are you ready for a mind shock, Maxwell?
Okay.
So apparently there was a weapons charge on Fenkel, and Fenkel accused a woman of spreading rumors about him. Does this mirror the Steven Avery case in any way?
That's crazy.
So Sandy Morris, of course, he ran her off the road after she was going to bars drunk and spreading rumors about him. So yeah, this Fenkel case is kind of weird. So so does crime lab corruption go all the way back to this case? So from this same newspaper article, this newspaper article in the Manitowoc Herald Times, November 17th, 1977, two officials from the State Crime Laboratory Bureau were the last of 20 witnesses to be called by District Attorney Dennis Vogel. Does that ring a bell, Maxwell? So that's the same guy from Avery's 85 frame up.
Oh
And
yeah. That's crazy.
and Special Prosecutor Patrick Harlow. I wonder if Harlow is related to Ken Kratz. The hearing got underway Wednesday morning and ran until 8:20 p.m. before it was adjourned until today. Mrs. Koila J. Wegner, a laboratory analyst, testified a 3-inch strand of hair found in Fenkel's car matched hair samples from the victim's body. The hair strand was similar in size, color, and general characteristics to hair samples from Deborah Sukawati, Mrs. Wegner said. She added that the tip of the hair strand was broken off and the root was missing. So, Maxwell, do you think that Vogel and these Manitowoc officials planted this hair in Fenkel's vehicle to frame him?
Yeah. Wait, yeah, most likely. But I just thought about this. I'm thinking like these people in this town. This is what I think. I could be wrong, but it's like a low crime activity town, so they have to make things up to not to keep themselves from being bored. So I'm thinking these people, these like these prosecutors, police officers, they should go to like a high crime area where they can not be bored and they don't have to make things up.
Manitowoc is a high crime area.
It is.
I mean, there's always stuff going down. I mean, I've only
Yeah,
started
but what
going
if
to a list.
what if
There have
they're all
been
set up?
murders.
What if they're all set up? So
There have been murders, disappearances, assaults, drug charges, weapons charges. I mean, this is not a lot of drunk people out there.
I see. All right.
But I mean, that is an interesting theory that boredom drove these psychopathic individuals to just start framing people because they're too bored. Maybe they're also frustrated with their own incompetence to find the real killers, or they are somehow associated with the real killers in all of these cases. But we're just getting started. All right, check this out. Also testifying was Richard W. Thompson, laboratory technician who assisted in an autopsy on the dead girl's body and in the search of 2 vehicles reportedly owned by Fenkel. Sweepings were obtained from a 1962 model Chevrolet and a 1966 model Chevrolet at the Two Rivers Police Department garage October 3rd, according to Thompson. Thompson generally described body tissue samples and clothing which he transported to the laboratory in Madison for analysis. He said there was no signs of blood or bloodstains found in the cars. So did they just plant a hair? Did they get wise? When the RAV4 was first found, everyone on the scene reported no blood being visible. You
Yeah.
remember that, Maxwell?
I remember no blood visible.
Yeah, all the officers on the so did they learn from their mistake back then when they did this the frame job? They didn't do the frame job properly. I mean, it looks like they didn't do it properly with the RAV4 either because they added the blood at the crime lab. Possibly. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's just how bizarre is this? So this is 1978. All right. So the court refused to allow the introduction of a blue jacket allegedly worn by Fenkel on the night of September 23rd and early 24th when he was out on the town with Ronald Dent. Dr. Kenneth A. Sigsmand, director of research for the Glendale Crime Laboratory, testified that reddish-brown stains on the jacket were, quote, not blood of any kind, end quote. See, that reminds me in the 85 conviction, they said Avery wore his own leather jacket when that was clearly not the jacket described by Bjornston. So, so they were like, oh, that's Avery's jacket. Oh, look, Avery wore his own jacket. That proves... Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Manitowoc is a special kind of place. So this was from June 9th, 1978 article, Manitowoc Herald Times. Manitowoc detective Richard Bray told of a meeting he attended last October 13th at which Fenkel and his attorney were present in the DA's office. The defendant was represented at the time by attorney Steve Alpert. Bray said Fenkel gave him a typed statement containing allegations as to what might have happened to Miss Sukawati. The statement said Debbie possibly went to Appleton for a party with the DC Eagles and that the Eagles may have killed her. The Eagles are a motorcycle gang which has members in the Fox River Valley, police said. Debbie and another girl did or were about to squeal to the police about something, the statement said. The something was not explained. The statement made reference to one of the hunters who found the victim's body in an abandoned gravel pit. He was identified as the driver of a 1966 model dark blue Chevrolet car who lived south of the Lakeview Outdoor Theater. The man was living with 3 girls from Michigan, all of whom were employed at a Two Rivers industrial plant. According to the statement, after Miss Sukawati's body was found, the statement said the 3 girls moved out of the residence they occupied with the man. The prosecution's claimed the statement was an attempt by the defendant to divert suspicion from himself. But what kind of backwards reasoning that? If he's innocent, why wouldn't he divert suspicion away from himself if he's trying to help find the truth?
True.
But at least they they allowed him to even say that. See, the Denny ruling didn't even allow Steven Avery or his representation to argue that anybody else could have done it. I mean, this is the most extreme perversion of a presumption of innocence, because if Avery had his rights violated, his presumption of innocence was violated, because they wouldn't even allow him to say someone else did it. June 10th, 1978, Vogel said Dent and Finkel were out looking for women that night, and they had been unsuccessful. Oh, man. October 10th, 1977, although the sheriff's department was notified of the disappearance of murdered Manitowoc waitress Deborah Diane Sukawati September 29th, this information was never passed on to the county traffic department. And in fact, the department never learned of the disappearance until discovery of the body was telephoned to the department 72 hours later. So again, we have lack of communication between departments. I mean, Manitowoc wasn't even supposed to be, they weren't supposed to be on the Avery salvage yard because he was suing them for $36 million. It was supposed to be Calumet County, and yet, why did Lincoln Coburn of Manitowoc always find everything? Everyone from Manitowoc is the one finding all the evidence against Avery. I've said this on previous podcasts, but is this whole test like a common sense test for adults? I mean, people actually think Avery's guilty, and he might be. I'm not saying he's not, but does the case presented make any logical sense for you to conclude that he's definitely guilty?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so here's another problem. This was mentioned September 7th, 1979. At one point in the motion for a new trial, it is alleged attorney Stephen R. Alpert's advice and actions were not based on Fenkel's best interests, but upon conflicts of interest and disloyalty to Fenkel. So do we have lawyers that are on the take as part of a conspiracy or cover-up, which was obviously the case with Brendan Dassey. Brendan Dassey and Len Kaczynski, who was later suspended. So the case gets stranger and stranger. December 14th, 1979. There was some misunderstanding as to how the records were lost. Joan Hoffman, clerk of circuit court, said the records were given to Judge Charles Larson of Port Washington, who presided at the Fenkel trial, and that Larson failed to return them. Larson is semi-retired and living in Arizona at the present time. You know who else retired to Arizona?
No, who's that?
James Link. Could be a coincidence. I mean, some people choose Arizona instead of Florida. I mean, who knows? March 2nd, 1989, Green Bay Press-Gazette reports, in his civil suit, so Fenkel is suing law enforcement as well. Fenkel claims on September 24th, 1977, Hilton confronted Sukawati at a downtown Manitowoc street corner about her contentions that Hilton had sexually assaulted her at an earlier date. Hilton took Sukawati away in his car and placed her purse in Fenkel's auto, Fenkel said in the lawsuit. Sometime between September 24th and September 26th, Hilton beat the woman to death, Fenkel claims in the lawsuit. Fenkel is asking for another trial plus $1.5 million in compensatory damages and $500,000 in punitive damages. He is also seeking a public apology. Does any of this sound familiar, Maxwell? Oh man, Manitowoc has a history of funny business. I mean, that's one way to put it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Fenkel also had previous charges for crimes, so he seemed like a good target if they were going to frame a guy because he's got a history, kind of like Steven Avery. But on November 7th, Fenkel was charged with first-degree murder in the death of 18-year-old Deborah Sukawati.
That's interesting. How did that come about?
What?
Or I mean, how did that come out? Like, I'm looking forward to more information.
How did he? Well, this whole thing was potentially a frame job, right, from the beginning.
We're talking about the same thing.
No, we're talking about Fenkel and Sukawati.
Oh yeah, but like, what you're saying, he was convicted, right?
He was sentenced to life in prison, yes.
Damn.
And he was denied new trials upon appeal, and just like Steven Avery.
So, and that what year was it?
So this was 1977.
So is he still like in there or what? Like alive?
I believe so, if he's still alive, yeah.
I'm just saying, if it was another frame up job, that kind of sucks.
So here's the Manitowoc Herald-Times, October 4th, 1977. The murdered woman whose body was found by hunters in the town of Kossuth about noon Sunday has been identified as Deborah Diane Sukawati, 18-year-old Manitowoc waitress, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Leroy Sukawati, Route 1, Valders. The victim was identified by District Attorney Dennis R. Vogel at a press conference in Vogel's office called Monday afternoon by the District Attorney and County Coroner James E. Powers. The conference followed an autopsy by Dr. John H. Fodden, Memorial Hospital pathologist. It determined death was, quote, due to multiple blows to the back of the head, end quote, Vogel reported. The death is definitely being treated as a homicide, but no one is in custody in it, and there are no suspects at this time, the district attorney said. Ms. Sukawati disappeared after working September 23rd, and she was subsequently reported missing. The time of death is not known exactly. On November 8th, 1977, Ronald Fenkel, 24, of Manitowoc, was charged Monday with first-degree murder in the death of 18-year-old Deborah Sukawati, whose body was found October 2nd in a gravel pit north of Two Rivers. A parking ticket issued to an auto owned by Fenkel originally led police to suspect his involvement. The ticket was found along with several personal articles belonging to Miss Sukawati in a plastic bag floating in the East Twin River in Two Rivers. Vogel said the state crime laboratory analysis of hair sweeping from Fenkel's car revealed a strand of hair of a rare type and in all probability of the same type as the hair of Deborah Diane Sukawati. The complaint issued against Fenkel also accused him of being in the vicinity of Sukawati's apartment shortly before she was to leave for work, September 24th. This is kind of weird, though, because is that the only evidence they have? A hair that could have easily been planted and missing a root? So that's kind of weird. Oh man, this is also kind of like the Bernstein frame up with Vogel, where the hair it wasn't even Avery. None of this makes any sense. Okay, are you ready for some more mind-shocking coincidences?
Sure.
So Sukawati was also the niece of Joseph Sukawati, who ran for the office of sheriff of Manitowoc County in 1976, the previous year. She's also the cousin of Carmen Boutwell. And so we also, because Avery's family was also involved in law enforcement, so in the past, and so like supposedly Kusarik had some hard feelings over being passed over for sheriff previously, and a whole bunch of weird, shady dealings with all these people. Okay, so during pre-trial publicity, Fenkel's lawyers tried to get a change of venue out of Manitowoc County, but they were denied. So here's the thing, if Fenkel knew that this waitress was going to blow the whistle on something involving possible law enforcement complicity, and then they snuffed her out, And I guess they were nervous that he wouldn't be convicted outside of Manitowoc because they didn't have enough corrupt officials in their pocket, like Vogel.
Okay.
That's kind of weird. So on June 10th, 1978, Ronald Fenkel was found guilty, sentenced to life in prison. So 1979, he sought a retrial. However, court files went missing.
How many court files were missing in Manitowoc?
I don't know most of them, but it's also Zellner's not allowed to retest anything. She's just not allowed access to the RAV4. She's not allowed to retest any evidence. I mean, it's kind of weird. They don't allow any retesting of anything, and documents go missing repeatedly. So, Ronald Fenkel, 25-year-old Two Rivers man serving a life sentence for first-degree murder, was returned to Manitowoc County Circuit Court today for a brief hearing. Purpose of the hearing was to reconstruct a portion of the preliminary records from the Fenkel murder case, which were inadvertently lost. How did they know that it was inadvertent? They're reporting this in the newspaper. How did they know for certain that it was inadvertent?
I don't know.
There was some misunderstanding as to how the records were lost. So if they don't know how they were lost, how do they know that it wasn't inadvertent? I mean, how does that that doesn't make any sense. Yep, doesn't make any sense. That was from December 4th, 1979, Manitowoc Herald Times. Oh, and then they just, endless cycle of hearings and denials. He was denied a new trial in 1980. So in 1989, Fenkel sued authorities when he was held captive in a prison uprising. All right, so now we're going to move to April 3rd, 1993. Winnebago DA asks Judge Carver to excuse himself. The state requesting the court to disqualify itself pursuant to Wisconsin law, which states that a judge shall disqualify himself when a judge determines that for any reason he or she cannot, or it appears he or she cannot act in an impartial manner. The motion does not describe the alleged conflict of interest faced by Carver. So that's kind of interesting. So there's some kind of an attempt to weed out some corruption or downplay some corruption. So this is September 11th, 1998. Coincidentally, September 11th, 2005 is when Avery got set free. A Washington County judge apparently circumvented state law by failing to order the jail booking of Oshkosh attorney Caroline Carver, who is charged with striking her husband with her car. And so this is his daughter, the judge's daughter. Wisconsin Statute 970.027 requires that during an initial court appearance in a felony case, the judge must direct a defendant's fingerprints, photographs, and other identifying data be obtained if the booking procedure had not been done earlier. Judge Annette Ziegler was informed during Carver's initial appearance Wednesday that the required booking had not been done, but she told Carver's attorney, "I will let the state work that out with you. That's more their concern than mine anyway." Here's another name that we're going to see soon. Okay. Ziegler refused comment after the court appearance. "The judge can't talk to you on this case," her clerk told a reporter. Contacted Thursday by telephone, Carver's Oshkosh attorney, George Curtis, said he did not plan to make Carver go through the booking process. "I don't think that any purpose would be served by that," Curtis said. When asked if the booking is standard in any felony case, Curtis replied, "This isn't a normal case." I guess by that logic, neither is the Steven Avery case or possibly this Fenkel case or any of these other cases that are just riddled with corruption. Asked to explain why Carver's case differs from others, he replied, "Are you serious?" When told the question was serious, Curtis snapped, "Climb back under your rock," and he hung up. Oh man, these sound like all very upstanding individuals. Carver, 36, is the daughter of Winnebago County Circuit Judge William Carver. Though the booking process poses little significance to most defendants, Carver's status as a judge advocate general in the Navy Reserve makes it potentially a significant matter even if she was later acquitted. Nina attorney Len Kaczynski. Does this guy sound familiar, Maxwell?
I forgot who that is.
That was Brendan Dassey's corrupt and incompetent attorney who was later suspended.
Oh, yeah.
So, a judge advocate general in the Army Reserve said the booking record would show up on her security clearance reports that could at least pose some barrier to promotion later in her career. Kaczynski said a conviction on even a misdemeanor could result in a reservist being removed from his or her position. Carver is charged with causing injury to her husband by negligent use of a dangerous weapon. The charge, which carries a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison and $10,000 fine, was brought in connection with an alleged domestic abuse incident at the Carver home July 25th. Carver's case was moved to Washington County after Winnebago County Circuit Judge Barbara Hart Key recused herself due to a potential conflict of interest. All these judges have conflicts of interest. That's weird. Winnebago County District Attorney Joe Paulus, who defeated Carolyn Carver in the 1994 election, appointed Brown County District Attorney John Zakowski a special prosecutor in the Carver case. Okay, so that's pretty weird. And this is, of course, Judge Carver's daughter, the judge who denied Fenkel his new trial. Were you expecting this level and layers of coincidence, Maxwell?
No.
So, from the Manitowoc Herald Times, March 31st, 2001, jilted wife charged for altercation. A lawyer was charged with criminal trespass, criminal damage, and disorderly conduct, all misdemeanors, after allegedly losing control at her estranged husband's girlfriend's home. All right. So she got off lightly. The other thing that's interesting is very astute researchers on Reddit. So there's the best Reddit sub on the Steven Avery case is TikTok Manitowoc, where you can find a lot of this information in an objective, non-biased manner, unlike some official subs like Making a Murderer and some of these other subs and Facebook groups where it seems like there's just people shilling for Manitowoc law enforcement and illogically shutting down any conversation that's objective or neutral or critical of Manitowoc in any way. Clearly not advocating for the truth. So apparently that this whole situation had something to do with real estate and that there were new subdivisions and the people involved were the same people involved in Steven Avery's and Brendan Dassey's cases. So this is pretty weird. Do they routinely just frame people?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay. So, of course, the Redonts, the same family that owns that gravel pit, as well as the neighboring gravel pit to Stephen Avery's salvage yard, where you have the whole Cuss Road debacle, and that also borders Manitowoc County property. So there could have been remains, well, there were remains found there allegedly, but Ken Kratz, I believe, said it wasn't pertinent to the investigation, even though there was a ton of activity there, and then that all got swept under the rug. Nothing to see there. Okay, are you ready to get into some occult strangeness?
Yep.
Okay, so do you remember David Bogatka?
Nope.
So this is the guy who alleges that this was all part of some good old boys club involving secret societies and cults, and these law enforcement individuals are all involved in that.
Okay, that's interesting.
He also claims he witnessed the whole debacle at during Avery's 85 frame up. Supposedly the police had no interest in pursuing Gregory Allen after the assault and all of that strangeness. We will be doing a dedicated episode on Bogatka and all of that weird business involving Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office personnel. So supposedly the Redonts belong to the Knights of Columbus. Are we going down Illuminati rabbit holes, Maxwell, in the Steven Avery case? Did you expect this to happen in the Steven Avery series?
Well, that's a lot of my go-to is the Illuminati rep, so, or at least not the Illuminati rep, but like kind of just the underground human trafficking type thing.
Which people used to just completely ignore all that. But after all of the new evidence coming out in the news with various human trafficking and government connections, I think, I don't know, the cognitive dissonant masses might be slapped awake on some of these things, some of these issues, when it becomes even more and more obvious. that even the most cognitive dissonant might have to say, wait a second. So the Redonts also, of course, owned a hunting cabin, which was behind the Avery property, and they own multiple gravel pits and quarries. Okay. Online researchers have found that someone in the Redont family is married into someone at the top of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. I mean, how much, I mean, it seems like there's a mountain of conflicts of interest. I mean, it's not like there's one or two, there's like 50. What's going on with all these conflicts?
I don't know.
All right, so let's move on to more strangeness. January 22nd, 1980. The body of Irene Rodig, 43, was found naked and bound by rope after officers responded to a suspicious fire at her residence. Rodig was mentally challenged and worked for the Holiday House, a workshop for people with mental disabilities. Nothing had been stolen, no motive, no suspects. Rodig had been speaking to her mother when the doorbell rang, approximately 2 hours before the fire. Her mother asked if she should hang on, and Rodig told her not to, as she knew who was at the door. Forensics tests confirmed she had sexual intercourse within 48 hours of her death. So I guess that means someone she knew. But that was another strange case. So she's found bound by rope. Okay, and there's a fire. All right, January 24th, 1983. Mary J. Zeigelbauer, student at Marquette, was raped and murdered in Manitowoc County, allegedly by a juvenile who was released from police custody less than 24 hours earlier. Her father, Robert, was the Manitowoc County executive in 2005 and one of the top officials who issued direct orders inexplicably banning the county coroner from the Avery property during the Hallback investigation. So that's kind of weird. Man, this just keeps getting weirder and weirder with the amount of people that are connected to Manitowoc County law enforcement.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Gregory Allen, who's under police surveillance, and then unexplainably, the surveillance is just lifted just for that window for him to attack Bernstein. And so Dave Bogatka, he states that the police were there watching the assault, and they let Allen get away. And we will get into him later. Okay, on May 13th, 1984, tax auditor Thomas Dresser died in Manitowoc County after drinking cyanide-laced Coca-Cola. I wonder how many people have died from drinking Coca-Cola laced with cyanide. Would you think the number is incredibly high, Maxwell, or no?
Just for that town or like all over?
No, just in general. I don't imagine that's a common occurrence, although Coca-Cola is a popular beverage. But okay, so the investigation was presided over by Sheriff Thomas Kusarik and District Attorney Dennis Vogel, the key figures in the cover-up of the 85 case. Okay, days later, Vogel announced that their investigation had concluded that the victim committed suicide. Does that sound shady at all?
Wait, who committed suicide?
The victim, Thomas Dresser, the guy that drank cyanide-laced Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Would that be your way to die? Wouldn't you just drink the cyanide? See, putting cyanide in Coca-Cola it seems to me another common sense test. Wouldn't you put cyanide in a drink if you're trying to kill somebody? What do you think? It seems to me that somebody that's looking to murder somebody would put cyanide in an unsuspecting victim's Coca-Cola drink.
Maybe I think they're watering it down, like maybe like to have a more calming effect rather than a jolt before the death.
I don't know. I mean, cyanide's relatively quick acting. I mean, I don't know. Like if let's say you're trying to murder somebody and you don't want them to know, and you'd slip poison into their drink. I mean, that method is probably thousands of years old, right?
Yeah.
People have been poisoning.
The cyanide come in like a rock form, or like is it solid or liquid?
Cyanide is a liquid. but it can exist in various forms. Cyanide is a rapidly acting, potentially deadly chemical that can exist in various forms. Cyanide can be a colorless gas or a crystal.
It's relatively painless, right? I mean, or do you start foaming in the mouth and bleeding from the eyes and shit like that? Because I'm thinking if it that is the effect if you go like all solid, like I'm thinking if it, I mean, the only reason I can think of is if you're gonna do it with soda or something, is just to do it softly and non-violently, not violently, but like not uncomfortably.
You could do it. You could do it by pill. So you can have a cyanide pill, and of course, it could have different strengths. So it could kill you quickly, or it could have really painful effects. So this is from Wikibooks: suicide, toxification, cyanide poisoning. Cyanide poisoning is a suicidal method that can either kill quickly or with horrific symptoms, depending on how the substance is administered. Wall Street trader Michael Marin famously killed himself in the courtroom by this method after the jury found him guilty of burning down his Phoenix mansion, an offense that carried a penalty of up to 15 years in prison. Wait a second, you're not allowed to burn your own house down? Oh, that's a subject for another time. He apparently took a capsule, then washed it down with a sports drink before falling to the floor a few minutes later in convulsions. So that one wouldn't be quick and painless. This process suffocates the body's cells. Deprived of oxygen, the cells are unable to produce the energy they need to stay alive. They stop functioning and eventually die, leading ultimately to the unconsciousness and death of the organism. The gas experienced by the inmate, so this is the worst effects is by cyanide gas. The gas experienced by the inmate as intense suffocation and air hunger. During an execution by lethal gas, an inmate may lose and subsequently regain consciousness several times, drifting in and out of conscious experience of the suffocating effects of cyanide gas. In addition, since cyanide cuts off the normal ability of a cell to utilize oxygen, the cell is forced to use an inefficient backup system in an attempt to maintain critical levels of energy. A byproduct of the system is lactic acid, which builds up in the cell, creating a painful condition known as acidosis. Plaintiffs' experts testified that the pain is similar to the pain accompanying intense physical activity or heart attack. Plaintiffs' experts also maintain that cyanide inhalation can lead to tetany, a painfully sustained muscular contraction or spasm. Tetany may be manifested by opisthotonos behavior, muscular contractions so severe that the body is arched backward like a bridge, with contractions of sufficient force to compress and fracture the vertebrae. Other possible manifestations of tetany include carpal pedal spasm, in which the muscles of the hand and feet contract so severely that they bend and twist in an unnatural and painful manner, and sardonic smile, in which the lip muscles are pulled tightly away from the teeth. To a conscious person, tetany is extremely painful.
That's some horrific shit.
I know, that was so disturbing. I mean, but does
That was rough. Like I imagine that whole thing. That's crazy. That's probably like as man. I'm thinking as bad or worse than burning in a fire or something, or like drowning. Actually, probably worse than drowning.
Yeah, that was what this description is this seems like one of the worst ways to die for sure. But it seems like in pill form it can kill very quickly.
Is that what the astronauts use? You know how they like in the movies they're like, okay, take this pill. If anything goes wrong, take this pill or whatever.
Yes,
You know
so.
what
Yeah,
I'm
I
talking about?
guess so.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, by the way. I've never seen a movie where they actually take the pill before the monster gets to them. I've never seen that. They should make a movie like that just to make it. Just thinking stuff.
This is from emedicinehealth.com. Those who attempt suicide by using cyanide pills or capsules may believe it's quick and painless. However, cyanide burns the stomach and prevents the body from using oxygen, causing a painful death.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, so it seems like fast acting is true, but it's not painless.
But at least it's fast.
Yeah, well, depending on the dosage. It says you could die from it days later as well. So yeah, there's a lot of intricacy to cyanide. It's not quite that simple. But I don't think they. It seems like Vogel just announced that the investigation concluded that the victim committed suicide. I wonder how they concluded that. Right?
Yeah.
On November 30th, 1984, the eve of the Greater Feast, Louise Frank, 64, disappeared without a trace and has never been found. October 1st, 1988, Cheryl Spaeth Duval, 38, disappeared and has never been found. November 15th, 1988. Get your MINDSHOCK hat on, Maxwell. Or your tinfoil. Mary Ann Den, a friend and employee of Dave Begatka, was found in her bed covered in blood. Her boyfriend was initially arrested, though the police later changed the story and bizarrely deemed it a heart attack. Begatka claims that Den was being harassed by members of the occult-based sex club he claims existed in Manitowoc, and that she was sleeping with a gun because she was in fear of them. When he suggested that they contact the police, she replied, "They are the police." How creepy is that?
Yeah, it's pretty creepy.
Why didn't she move? I mean, this is so creepy. I remember when Dave Begatka first went public with his story, people criticized him and said that he made that up, that Marianne Den, there was never any murder, she never died, he just made that up. But we will definitely be going deep into the Dave Begatka story in upcoming episodes. Yeah, that's rough. All right, November 2nd, 1990, All Souls Day. The body of Nathan Terrens, 2, was found floating in Manitowoc River. The father was arrested and convicted, but strong evidence later emerged showing he was railroaded and that his wife and her paramour may have killed the baby. The truth remains unclear. That's pretty horrible. This is actually listed in the National Registry of Exonerations. So on this website, it also has currently 2,509 exonerations, and underneath 22,094 years lost. That's how many years innocent people have spent in prison. And that's just of the exonerations that they got. Obviously, there's a lot more. What do you think about that, Maxwell?
That's messed up.
So this is Daniel Terrens. This happened in Manitowoc. He had a 20-year sentence. So there was false confession, perjury or false accusation, inadequate legal defense. November 2nd, 1990, the body of 2-year-old Nathan Terrens was found floating in the Manitowoc River in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So again, we're just getting started, but does this seem like a low crime rate area to you?
Uh,
Especially, there doesn't seem to be that many people even living there. But anyway, police focused on the boy's parents, 27-year-old Daniel Terrens and his wife, Christine. Christine told police that she was at a restaurant at the time of the incident and that she had been raped on her way home. Terrens, who had a prior conviction for domestic violence relating to an assault on Christine, was interrogated by Manitowoc police and ultimately, according to police, gave a written statement in which he said he pushed the child, causing him to fall and strike his head. Terrens said the boy's death was an accident and denied intentionally killing the boy. Police said Terrens told them he was drunk and that when the boy appeared lifeless, he wrapped him in a blanket and took him down to the river. Portions of the interrogation also were tape recorded. That's kind of weird. Why would they only record portions of it? Did they edit out where they were coercing him? Terrens was charged with first-degree reckless homicide and went on trial in Manitowoc County Circuit Court in 1991. The prosecution's case relied almost entirely on Terrens' statements. The tape-recorded statement was played for the jury. A detective testified that Terrens told him that Nathan was in bed and then got up, and that Terrens was upset because he thought Nathan would wake his older siblings. The detective said that when Nathan got out of the bed, that was the cream on top of the whole pudding, you know. The detective said that the boy was waking up the other kids and making it twice as bad, and I got pissed at him. The detective quoted Terrens as saying, "I told him you get to bed, and he wouldn't get to bed." The detective testified he said that Nathan just kept screwing around and screwing around and screwing around, and that he said it was with his toys, and ultimately said that Nathan was like coming towards him, and he pushed Nathan. He said that is where Nathan hit his head. Did the defendant intend to smother his child? The detective said. Probably not. He lost it. He was mad. He just grabbed his little head and said, be quiet, screwing around, and screwing around. But he held on too long, and Nathan was unconscious, and he thought Nathan was dead, and he put Nathan into the water to make it look as if he had walked in. A pathologist testified that Nathan was still alive when he was put into the river and died of drowning. Man, this is disturbing. Christine Terrens testified that she was at a restaurant at the time of the incident and was raped on the way home. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. The prosecution, both in opening statement and closing argument, emphasized Terrens' statement that the boy was screwing around and screwing around and screwing around. The prosecutor said that the most important evidence came from Terrens' own statement to the detective. On March 22nd, 1991, the jury convicted Terrens of first-degree reckless homicide, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After the sentencing, a new attorney was appointed to handle the appeal and retained an expert in acoustic analysis who prepared enhanced versions of the tape. The expert found that the screwing around language was apparently said by the detective, not Terrens. All right, Maxwell, call me crazy, but is this weird? I mean, is there a precedent here in Manitowoc County of coercing confessions?
Yeah.
A motion for a new trial was filed and a hearing was held in April 1992. The expert testified that the detective made the comment screwing around and also the comment cream on the top of the whole pudding. The prosecution agreed that not only these statements but other comments attributed to Terrens were actually spoken by the detective. The detective took the stand and conceded that he made the statements. Terrens' trial lawyer testified that he had examined transcripts of the interrogation and listened to the tapes, but thought that the portions were difficult to understand. He said he discussed both tapes and the transcript with Terrens, but never played the tapes for Terrens, so Terrens could assess their accuracy. The judge granted the motion for new trial, ruling that Terrens' trial lawyer had provided an inadequate legal defense. The prosecution appealed, and in October 1992, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals upheld the order for a new trial. Terrens went on trial for a second time in May 1993. The detective, limited to what Terrens actually said, testified that Terrens told him he was drunk and didn't intend to injure the child. The detective said Terrens said he had been drinking heavily, had quarreled with his wife, who was having an affair, and pushed the boy by accident. His brother Joshua, who was 3 years old at the time of the incident, testified that he saw Terrens strike Nathan with a stick. But on cross-examination, Joshua said he had been told what to say. Man, this is creepy stuff, Maxwell. What do you think about this kind of law enforcement procedure in Manitowoc?
That's a guide for manipulation.
Terrens' defense attorney contended that Terrens' wife, Christine, had abused Nathan, and she and her lover had tossed the boy into the river while Terrens was passed out. Christine admitted that she had testified falsely during the first trial, that on the night of the incident she had been raped by another man. She admitted that in fact she was having an affair with that man. Here's the thing I don't understand. What are the odds? I mean, what are the odds that on the night that your husband kills your son, you happen to be raped on your way home from work? I mean, is that winning the lottery of just evil devastation? Think about it. If you're a mother,
Yeah, that's crazy.
that struck me odd right away because out of like, what are the chances that you have your kid killed and you get raped on the same day?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just like I think there should be some more evidence there. Anyway, on May 8th, 1993, the jury acquitted Terrens and he was released. 10 years later, in 2003, Terrens was charged with sexually and physically assaulting Christine on the anniversary of Nathan's birth. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. So I guess he's back in prison. So 10 years after he was released. This is also weird to me. I guess he got so blackout drunk he couldn't remember anything, and then the officers took advantage of that. It's still unclear how the kid. I mean, somebody should have to pay for the kid's death. I mean, it's this all. The truth remains unclear is an understatement. All right, let's move on. No exact date. So around the fall equinox of 1993, Pamela Claflin was brutally raped and murdered after leaving a bar in Manitowoc. The man who was arrested and convicted, Randall Mattia, maintains his innocence to this day. It later emerged that one of the state's witnesses, a convict, received a sentence reduction, and beyond that, money for his testimony. It also later emerged that a reputedly corrupt police officer with scars on his face had been pulled over while off duty and had the victim's personal effects in his glove compartment. One significant revelation was that the rape kit tests were actually negative for Mattia, not positive, as Deputy Sheriff Gene Koosh. Does that name sound familiar, Maxwell?
Sort of.
Gene Koosh is the guy that drew the suspect sketch from Avery's mugshot to make sure that Bernstein identified him.
Oh yeah.
So he lied and said that Mattia was positive for the rape kit when they were actually negative. So this was false. He falsely represented them in perjured testimony during the trial. Another interesting fact about Koosh is he served with the U.S. Army Security Agency in Vietnam. So some online researchers think that he may have participated in the Phoenix program. The Phoenix program was designed to identify and destroy the Viet Cong via infiltration, torture, capture, counterterrorism, interrogation, and assassination. You also know the rumor about Gene Koosh?
What is it?
So in D.A. Griesbach's book, in his first book on Steven Avery, it says this: no one outside of law enforcement and the court system knew at the time, but on the night before the trial began, and a day after the Herald Times reported that the defense would be allowed to present evidence about the blood vial and the defendant's wrongful conviction lawsuit, former Chief Inspector Gene Koosh died unexpectedly, sitting in his favorite living room chair in the comfort of his home. The official cause of death was listed as acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack. And although friends said Gene wasn't a religious man, he had a Bible at his side. Gene had obviously been in denial. I ran into him in the courthouse parking lot a few weeks before he died, and we spoke briefly about the Avery case in the midst of television trucks with their live feeds and antennas rising 30 feet into the sky. It was a shame you guys released Avery from prison, he said with a straight face, because he and Alan could have both assaulted Penny Bernstein on the beach that day. The not-so-subtle inference, if we hadn't cut him loose, Teresa Hallback would still be alive. Koosh had expressed similar doubts at his deposition in the wrongful conviction lawsuit a few months earlier. Yes, he replied to one of the plaintiff's attorneys. I've heard that DNA evidence supposedly exonerated Mr. Avery, but I don't know that on personal knowledge because I haven't seen the reports. I don't believe everything I read in the newspaper. Who knows, he suggested. Maybe the DNA evidence was fabricated, or maybe they both did it. So Gene Koosh still thought Avery was guilty in the frame-up. Okay, it's admitted most speculation, but did Gene Koosh's death have anything to do with the fact that the Avery trial would start the next day? Was Gene afraid that Avery would be acquitted because of what happened 22 years earlier? Or was his death just another odd coincidence in a case that was chock full of odd coincidences from the very beginning? So, what do you think about that? So he died clutching a Bible right before Avery's trial began from the wrongful conviction.
Huh.
What do you think about that?
That's crazy.
And this guy, Gene Koosh, was a repeated perjurer. So he perjured testimony during this trial when he said Mattia was positive for a rape kit in the case of Pamela Claflin, fall equinox 1993. And Mattia was convicted. He maintains his innocence to this day. How many people were falsely convicted in Manitowoc, Maxwell?
Probably like half the town.
I mean, this is crazy. This is really, really crazy. And there was supposedly a corrupt police officer that had the victim's personal effects in his glove compartment. Is this strange shades of Andrew Coburn, who some people think was involved in whatever happened to Teresa Hallback? All right, let's move on. Fall equinox, 1997. 5 years later, Officer Dale Ten Haken of the Manitowoc Police Department was killed execution style with shots to the head and the abdomen. 2 teenagers were arrested and convicted on the testimony of their girlfriends who escaped possible charges by turning state's evidence. They had been captured with the assistance of Julie Kramer, who later resurfaced in the Hallback investigation. Both young men were represented by public defender, guess who, Maxwell?
Cherinsky or some shit.
Yep, Len Kaczynski, Brendan Dassey's brilliant attorney. Can you believe this, Maxwell? How can you make this stuff? If someone made this up for a novel, nobody would believe it, right? They'd be like, that's unbelievable. That's just too unrealistic. Imagine watching a movie about Manitowoc County, like 50 years in Manitowoc County, or even whatever, the 100 years of the county. No one would believe this level of unrealistic happenstance and coincidence, right?
Yeah, the novel would be like it would be laughed at.
Exactly. They'd be like, there's no way, like, these people just keep framing people and they're corrupt and nobody does anything about it. That's too unbelievable.
It's implausible, or yeah,
Yes,
I don't know.
absolutely. Absolutely. So apparently, Len Kaczynski was an Army intelligence asset at one point as well. And here's another thing: Kaczynski said to the press that his client's story was, quote, hard to believe, end quote. So he's saying his own client is hard to believe. Do you consider that? Do you consider that adequate defense by your attorney when he's telling the press that your story is hard to believe? Oh man, this is rough. This is rough. I mean, some of these almost make the Steven Avery, the frame up look not that bad compared to some of these, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
The official story is that Dale Ten Hacken was shot and killed after making a traffic stop on the driver of a car for not having license plates or its headlights on at an apartment complex. Very, very bizarre. All right, so then we have the 1999 hit and run of Ricky Hochstetter. So a lot of the same individuals that were involved with the Teresa Hallback case. So there were reports that a police officer had killed him, supposedly accidentally while driving drunk. Among the early suspects were Sheriff Tom Kucerik and Rob Herman, who is now the sheriff. Another was Rick Rawl, who knew Steven Avery and to whom Avery had placed a 40-second phone call on Halloween 2005 when Hallback disappeared. The circumstances surrounding this call have never been established. I mean, we have so many layers of coincidence here. Is it possible they're not coincidences, Maxwell? I know you're king of the coincidences, but is it possible these are not coincidences?
Possible.
So if a lot of these officers are involved in some kind of club, as Dave Bogatka asserts, have they killed and framed all these people and that's their MO? And they just keep doing it.
Sounds like it.
And if they're all complicit in all this, they just have to keep covering for each other, right? Because they can't blow the whistle now, right? Because then they'll be like, oh, well, what about all this other stuff? They'll all testify against each other and the whole house comes crumbling down.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Teresa Hallback, who disappears on Halloween 2005. A lot of strange happenings happen on Halloween or around these occult dates. So on November 3rd, the day Hallback is reported missing, Carmen Bootwell dies of a reported drug overdose. So there were no needle marks on her body, and her family believed she was strangled to death. Her mother had seen her earlier and said she was in good spirits. The other thing is, Bootwell bore a striking resemblance to Hallback. And when they found her, they initially thought she was Hallback. And Hallback and Bootwell were related through marriage. Actually, I don't believe we've stated this before. Do you know who Dave Remaker is? Lieutenant Dave Remaker?
Yeah,
He's actually a cousin of Sheriff Tom Kucerik, who was involved in the 85 frame-up of Avery's.
yeah, but he was one of the cops in the bedroom or some shit.
Remaker, I don't think was. That was Blank and Andrew Coburn. Remaker was involved in other evidence collection. He declared the case would likely never be solved. That's an interesting thing to say if you're an investigating officer, isn't it? Isn't that your job? He's basically admitting his incompetence or admitting his knowledge of something shady going on. So, days before, Boutwell and her boyfriend, a violent criminal who was mysteriously released during this period despite pending charges and a long criminal record, were being processed through the courts for drug offenses. Oh, this is shades of Gregory Allen. He was arrested shortly after the release of Making a Murderer and is currently serving prison time. There were later indications Bootwell may have been supplied drugs by a prominent pharmacist who has been protected by police. It would later emerge that Bootwell was under scrutiny by federal agencies and that the DEA had driven her to a remote location for an intimidating and undocumented interview in October 2001. Bootwell was cremated at a funeral home owned by the spouse of Lieutenant Mike Bushman, who was one of Avery's arresting officers in 1985 and who came out of retirement for the new frame-up. Is this a coincidence, Maxwell?
Could be.
In a series of highly unusual moves, the police took control of the cremation and delayed the funeral until the day the cremains publicly linked to Hallback were discovered. So she wasn't allowed to have her funeral until they discovered allegedly Hallback's remains. Do you find that a coincidence, Maxwell?
No.
Oh, finally, we got something that you don't think is a coincidence. Why would the police not allow the funeral to happen? Is that enough for people to start raising eyebrows in Manitowoc, or is that still not enough?
They're pushing the envelope on, like, deception.
Well, I would say not allowing the coroner on the scene. I mean that's all you need. That's all you need there. Do you really? I mean that's ripping the envelope completely open just on that one thing, wouldn't you say? And also not taking pictures or documenting the crime scene. Wouldn't you say that's completely ripping the envelope open right there without even considering anything else?
It could be, yeah, I don't know. They're trying to push. They're trying to push it. See how far they can get.
November 26, 2008, hunters found the remains of Aririt Chuprevich, who had been missing for 5 years, in a shallow grave near the line dividing Manitowoc and Brown counties. She had been shot to death. Her husband was a retired doctor, and she had been pursuing a degree in international studies at St. Norbert College. In 2014, there were reports that a number of people had been murdered in Manitowoc County in a very short period of time, some at a local sports bar. The police denied these rumors, though some locals believed the murders were being covered up by police, a reaction that suggests such things aren't uncommon in Manitowoc County. Oh, man. All right, you ready for some more coincidences, Maxwell?
Yeah.
On February 3rd, 2016, shortly after the release of Making a Murderer, and a day after the occult holidays Imbolc and Candlemas, Cor Yang was shot to death in Manitowoc after answering his door. Yang also happened to have been arrested on Halloween 2005, the date of Hallback's disappearance. I'm not sure what connections can be drawn here, but if he was arrested on Halloween, did he see something or have something to do with what law enforcement was concocting regarding Hallback?
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you ready for some more coincidences, Maxwell? We're not done. We're not
Okay.
done.
Okay.
All right, Manitowoc local Stephen Grimm allegedly committed suicide on July 1st, 2016. He posted on Reddit that he knew Tom Kuceric's daughter, Nancy. He alleged that she and her brother had been subject to horrific physical and sexual abuse in the basement of their home. He alleged that Kuceric had hit Ricky Hochstetter. He claimed he was being harassed by police. Shortly afterwards, he was found dead. Grimm served in the Navy 74 through 77 and was well regarded in the community. He had been arrested earlier in the year after breaking into a school while high on drugs. He reportedly, quote, thought he was a knight, end quote. Okay. Do you find that weird that he ends up dead after making these statements on Reddit?
That's kind of messed up. And especially all his comments are still on Reddit. It's kind of weird.
You know, here's some other weird stuff going back over a century. So this is in the Quad City Times, September 4th, 1858. Three brothers named Thomas of the town of Mishicot, Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, have been arrested on a charge of beating a Bohemian whom they met in the road so as to occasion his death. The Bohemian population of the town were much excited and threatened to lynch the parties, who were kept in jail for their own safety. That's kind of weird. October 6th. October is a big month in for strange goings on. This is 1880, Maxwell. October 6th. The Boston Weekly Globe. 17-year-old girl in Wisconsin confesses to killing her mistress because she scolded her. So this is Manitowoc, September 29th. Anna Stroker, who had been on trial here for the murder of her employer, Miss Nancy Haywood, was yesterday visited by her mother, who, beholding up a crucifix and adjuring her to tell the truth, got from her a confession of the murder, which she afterward repeated in court. She said that Nancy scolded her and called her crazy one Sunday, which so exasperated her that she pushed her mistress down on the floor and, picking up an axe, struck her on the neck and head, and finding her lifeless, dragged her into the yard and concealed the body. She misled the neighbors who found the body. The girl is only 17 years old and can neither read nor write. She has hitherto shown no signs of guilt. How often does a 17-year-old girl bludgeon her teacher to death with an axe? Any guess on that, Max?
Not a lot. Not a lot.
But in Manitowoc,
It's commonplace.
oh man, this is rough. This is rough. All right. December 9th, 1905, Stevens Point Journal. Son's awful crime. Slays mother with a flat iron and then mutilates body, thought to be insane. Manitowoc, Wisconsin, December 9th. Slain by her son, J. Wenzel Coons, with a flat iron. Mrs. Mary Coons, age 70, was found dead in her home Thursday night, blood bespattered and fearfully mutilated. Young Kunz confessed several hours later. He is thought to be insane. Mrs. Ignatz Kunz, a daughter-in-law of the aged woman, discovered the body lying across a bed in the same position she had left her 2 hours previous, and the son was in the house exhibiting no signs of fear. The dead woman was bound and gagged, bed clothing being used. Kunz, the son, was immediately placed under arrest, and when taken to jail, he broke down. May 23rd, 1940. Clarion Ledger, Jackson, Mississippi. Mother kills son so he can join, quote, some dead boy. Manitowoc, Wisconsin, May 22nd. Jackie Varlin, 7, who the police said was shot 3 times last night by his mother, died in the Holy Family Hospital today. Police Lieutenant Aaron Peterson said the mother, Mrs. J.H. Varlin, about 37, was detained. The shooting occurred in the Verlon home. Officers Charles Denor and Melvin Reinhardt said Mrs. Varlin told them, "I've killed my boy. If he doesn't die, you'll kill him for me if you take him away with you, won't you? Because I've got a lot of other people to kill." Denner and Reinhardt said Mrs. Varlin also told them that some dead boy had been communicating with her and had been asking to have her son join him. How disturbing is that, Maxwell?
Yeah, that's very disturbing.
So supposedly there's a dead boy communicating with her and was asking her to have her son join him. She also tells the police that if the boy isn't dead, that the police will kill them for her, won't they? And that she also has a lot of other people to kill.
Yeah, that's messed up.
This is Manitowoc County, 1940. I think we should just call it Coincidence County. What do you think? Instead of Manitowoc County.
That has a ring to it.
Yeah, Coincidence County. But like I said, if there was a movie or a book made about this, nobody would believe it. It's just too unrealistic.
They can make it to like a horror movie or slasher film or something.
Yeah, there's just no shortage of coincidences in this case. Absolutely bizarre. So, final thoughts, Maxwell. Coincidence County, Manitowoc County, and we're going to have to dive deeper in some of these aspects of this case, including the club, as Bigotka claims involves police officers and connecting all these dots. But it seems like locals know about this. What do you think? Like small town rumors and things like that, and people who know people. Is this kind of a strange open secret in Manitowoc?
Strange open secret. I don't know.
And do you believe there's some kind of occult influence over Manitowoc County? Are these people
I'm,
kind
I'm
of
starting. I'm starting to feel that vibe, that theory with the cult.
yeah? It's very
Because it's too bizarre. Like it's
yeah,
just.
yes. Well, we hope you enjoyed another edition of MindShock True Crime in the Steven Avery series. If you like the podcast, donate to our PayPal. Like the podcast video. You could also feel free to share it across social media platforms. Questions, comments, theories, leave them in the comments section. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Like and follow our Facebook page for exclusive updates. You could also check us out Twitter, Reddit, Patreon, and Patrons do get priority for case requests. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
And Maxwell Powers.
We'll catch you guys next time.